You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got a major update here. The DOJ has officially filed its motion to release grand jury information as it relates to the Epstein case. This is what Pam Bondi and Donald Trump had said they were going to do yesterday. Now they've done it, but their filing contains a major caveat, and I'm going to put it right up here on the screen. It says that it's going to seek to redact not just victim information, but other, quote, personal identifying information. Victim information notwithstanding, because I don't think there's anybody who wants the victim information to be released, but isn't that personal identifying information exactly the information that we would want to be exposed here? Isn't that the whole point of getting some sunlight on all of this stuff?
Yeah, Brian, that's one of the reasons to dislike this government motion that was just filed. But that's only one of the reasons that this is really nothing more than a bad episode of a reality show. So first of all, personal identifying information, PII, is a term of art that we use in the federal government, has to do with social security numbers, dates of birth, home addresses and all. But of course, you know, the first thing you think of when you read something like that is, so you're not even going to talk about Donald Trump because that would tend to identify Donald Trump. Who knows what would happen if any of this stuff ever got into the hot little hands of Pam Bondi and a court had ordered that it could be disclosed. But let me talk about the more fundamental reasons that this thing is all for show. This is public relations. This is not really, you know, a legitimate legal filing in court. First of all, grand jury is governed by Rule 6C in the big, ugly blue book of federal laws, the United States Code. I never leave home without it, and I reread it just to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything since I retired from the Department of Justice, and I hadn't forgotten anything. I have filed these motions as a prosecutor, seeking to have a judge give me permission to release grand jury transcripts and other evidence. You know when? When I was investigating, for example, a murder in Washington, D.C., and the target of the investigation, the suspected killer, had also killed somebody in Maryland and in Virginia. I would go to the court, I would ask permission to share the grand jury information in my investigation in D.C. with the law enforcement and prosecution authorities in Maryland and Virginia because they were investigating the same target for crimes in their jurisdiction. That's when we go to the court and we ask for permission to release grand jury materials. And if you read the rule, it sets out when a judge can, and only when a judge can, grant the government's motion to release grand jury transcripts and other materials. It's when you're trying to share it with other involved law enforcement agencies. There's a terrorism exception, there's a banking exception, but that's it. There is no exception that, you know what, this is really going to be of interest to the public. Therefore, yeah, I'm the judge and I'm going to order that it be released. Now, Brian, let me hasten to add, there are some judges who have taken the position that even though that's not permitted, literally not permitted under the rules of criminal procedure, some judges will say, well, I think I have the inherent authority to release anything that, you know, might be sort of presenting such exceptional circumstances, and there is such a searing public need to disclose this information that I'll order it disclosed. Now, that can happen. It has happened, but it doesn't happen often. So here's the first reason this information may never see the light of day. The judge may deny this motion and say, the rules don't provide for release under these circumstances. What does that give Donald Trump the opportunity to do? Say, can you believe I had my attorney general ask the judge to release these materials and the judge said no? The judge must be a radical.
It's part of a conspiracy. It's a radical leftist judge.
Exactly. So that's reason number one. The judge may rightfully, in accordance with the rules, refuse to release these transcripts. But two, in the event they get released, who do they go to? Pam Bondi. Who decides what should be disclosed to the public? The courts will not monitor that if the judge signs this order saying, okay, I am allowing for the release of grand jury materials. Then it's up to Pam Bondi as to what she then turns over to the public and lets us see. Do you think for a minute anything in there that would make Donald Trump look bad, never mind committing a crime?
No, not in a million
really
years.
Think she's going to release? Pam is going to release that to us? Come on,
Right.
How foolish are we? And here's the third thing. These cases were indicted. The Jeffrey Epstein case and the Ghislaine Maxwell case, Jeffrey Epstein's convicted co-conspirator, they were indicted by the Trump administration. So do you really think Bill Barr, when he was overseeing these investigations, said, oh, you've got some really incriminating evidence against Donald Trump? I want you to put that before the grand jury so you can lock it in under oath as sworn testimony to be used against Donald Trump sometime in the future. Really? Do you really think Bill Barr would have allowed that? So listen, there are so many reasons that even if, against all odds and against the rules of criminal procedure, some of this stuff begins making its way into the public square, a judge authorizes the release of it, I think it's very unlikely any of it will have anything to do with Donald Trump, either because Pam Bondi ain't going to show that to us or because it was never put before the grand jury in the first instance. And Brian, that's why, what have people been clamoring for? The Epstein files and Epstein's client list.
Right.
And the files are voluminous. The grand jury transcripts are probably a small, minute fraction of the evidence that was collected up during the Epstein and Maxwell investigations. So all of this is for show and nothing more.
Well, let me ask you this. Everyone's been asking, to that exact point, for the Epstein files. Pam Bondi and Donald Trump decided to give something to Americans that we were not asking for, which is the grand jury testimony, which, by the way, she can then cherry pick what she needs from that. But does the DOJ have the file available, and is there anything preventing Pam Bondi from releasing the file? Like, we're on this side quest right now where we have to pretend that the gatekeeper is this judge and that we couldn't possibly get access to any other information other than the grand jury testimony. But Pam Bondi has the file at the DOJ. Is there anything stopping her from just releasing that massive amount of information and material that she already has?
Yeah, there are probably storage rooms full of Epstein and Maxwell files at both the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office, where these cases were handled, and at the Maine Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. There's no reason, and there's a caveat to this statement. There's no reason Pam Bondi cannot begin releasing just big bucket loads of evidence from those files, including Epstein's client list. The only thing you have to be careful of is if there's information in there that's not corroborated, like maybe you got some anonymous tips. The bane of our existence as prosecutors is we get anonymous tips, and then it kind of becomes evidence in the case, but often it's not reliable. Sometimes it's people who have a beef about against somebody, and they call in an anonymous tip saying, let me give you some dirt on Joe Smith, even though Joe Smith didn't do anything wrong. So you don't want to put into the public square stuff that is uncorroborated and that may be flat out false. But, federal prosecutors and FBI agents, when we're investigating in tandem in cases like this, we're pretty good about documenting and corroborating important incriminating evidence that comes in and being able to sniff out and set to the side stuff that's bullshit, that's not corroborated, and that we don't believe is factual. And you don't want to dirty somebody up unnecessarily by throwing it all out into the public square. That is the one thing that I think Pam Bondi would have to contend with when she was releasing the files. But I don't think she intends to release anything, especially anything that might make Donald Trump look bad.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the reality is Trump has shown by his own behavior that he has a vested interest in keeping this thing under wraps or not releasing all of the information that they have, which is, again, why they're offering up this consolation as if it's what people are asking for when it's not. They're not asking for grand jury testimony, which is a small fraction of the incriminating information. They're not asking for the pertinent files, which is just Trump speak. It's Bondi speak for anything that does not incriminate the God King. And so at the end of the day, this is just their way of being able to have plausible deniability, that they're being transparent, that they're offering some modicum of transparency, while at the same time ensuring that they have full control over the process. Like you said, there is no world in which anything incriminating for Donald Trump would be exposed here, and yet by virtue of Donald Trump's behavior, by his actions here, it's clear that he has some link. And so we're not going to get what we need, which is the truth, because the guy who stands to lose a lot by being exposed here is the same person who's in charge of releasing all of this information.
Yeah, I mean, it really goes back to some of the fundamentals. Who criminally investigated Epstein and Maxwell? The Bill Barr, Donald Trump, Department of Justice. Do you really think what they focused on was anything that might implicate Donald Trump, or might they have guarded against creating and documenting any evidence that might have made its way into sort of the sphere of knowledge of investigators that might have involved Donald Trump? Well, look, that's what we're not here to look at that. We're here to see what Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell did and indict them for those crimes. So all of this, there are so many layers that are protecting against the people, we the people, ever seeing anything incriminating that might be contained in those files about Donald Trump.
What do you make of Senator Dick Durbin's letter to Pam Bondi explaining that he had reason to believe that FBI agents, 1,000 of them, were put on this thing so that they can flag any mention of Donald Trump that would pop up in these files?
Yes, of course. Flag that information for what purpose? To release it to the public? I think not. Is
Right.
that really why he selected people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi to make sure they could get to the bottom of Donald Trump's misconduct? Come on now, how foolish are we?
Right. Well, so then let's finish off with this, Glenn. In light of this new development, in light of the fact that Donald Trump is seeking to take control of the reins here and take complete ownership of the narrative and really secrete any information that would be damaging to him, and again, his behavior would lend itself to this idea that there is damaging information within these files for him, what would your message to Trump supporters be, assuming that these folks are acting in good faith and that their priority here is not blind deference to the God King, it's not protecting the commander-in-chief, it's not just making sure that Donald Trump is taken care of, but these folks who are acting in good faith and who earnestly want to see a system exposed where, this top echelon of very powerful, very influential, very well-connected people can commit heinous crimes with impunity, and assumes, because Donald Trump said it, that he would be the one to dismantle this system, when in fact it looks like he's very much the one entrenching it.
Yeah, I would say to Donald Trump's supporters, there's a good reason for you to want to see what is contained in the Epstein files and on the Epstein client list, in part because Republicans have been promising to release it and to get to the bottom of it and to disclose it for a very long time. Even Pam Bondi, I think it was on February 21st of this year, went on Fox News. And when she was asked point blank, are you going to release the Epstein client list? She said, it's on my desk right now for review. And the implication was, of course, I'll be releasing it after I can review it. And then, just weeks later or a couple of months later, she says, oh, no, that thing that I said was on my desk doesn't exist. I mean, don't be played for suckers by Trump and Pam Bondi. There's a reason people wanted to see what is in those files. And the reason, Brian, is because if it implicates Republicans, if it implicates Democrats, if it implicates independents, if it implicates the titans of business or oil or pharma or military-industrial complex or big entertainment, big holiday, we should know about it, right? These are not things that the government should be suppressing, should be secreting. This is the kind of stuff that, should be a matter of public record, so we all know who was involved in this horrific, fairly widespread, it seems, sex trafficking ring headed up by Epstein and Maxwell to, just victimize young girls in the most heinous of ways. These are things that the people should know.
Right. And look, the Trump administration, it's clear that they are trying to take their supporters for fools, to sell them a bill of goods, to pretend that this effort to release grand jury testimony is somehow answering the call of full transparency with the Epstein files. Again, to your exact point, if they wanted to release these files, they have them. They are at the DOJ's disposal. They're going a different route because they need to obfuscate the truth, and that's what's happening right here. So with that said, we will, of course, stay on top of this as this issue continues to play itself out. For those who are watching, if you'd like to support our work and follow along, please make sure to subscribe. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe to our channels, but it's the best way to support us and independent media more broadly. I'll put the links right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.